Hello, White Sox fans, and welcome into a Sunday Funday edition of Sox On Tap. It's Tony Marchese alongside NWI Steve. We're here to talk about a 4-game sweep at the hands of the Baltimore Orioles. More riveting stuff from our Chicago White Sox this weekend. Steven, you got to take in, I believe, 2 of these ball games, maybe one when it was one, but I know you tried to take in 2 of them, and the weather sort of prevented you from the other one. If I recall correctly, we're here to talk about all 4 of these losses. As I said, Steven, how was your day at the ballpark, and how are you doing, my friend?
Hey, Anthony. Well, they didn't win a game the entire series. Not great. So as a result, my mood is not good. We're back on a 45 win pace. Everything is terrible. Eat Arby's.
Yeah, that sums it up pretty well. I mean, we could probably end the show with that, but there are some things that we do need to talk about. We'll break down a little bit of what happened on Thursday night. This ball game ended in a very controversial manner. We've got some fireworks to talk about, maybe out of the clubhouse from this afternoon, and a couple of other topics that we'll hit on here. Steve, let's run through these scores real quick for you. Thursday night, 8-6 loss. White Sox offense was sort of in this one. Then you go to Friday, 6-4, another 2-run loss. That was a Craig Kimbrell save, the second of the series. I didn't think that was going to happen. Don't exactly enjoy that. Then we go to Saturday, another 2-run loss, and today, 3 runs. Kimbrell gets 3 saves in this. That's sort of the kick in the nuts, I feel, at this point here. But I mean, things are already super bad with the Chicago White Sox. Garrett Crochet did look special today. I want to start off the show talking a little bit about what you saw from Mr. Garrett Crochet today.
He looked outstanding today. He went out there, was pounding the strike zone again, as I have enjoyed watching over much of the last 4 to 5 starts. He unfortunately had his scoreless inning streak ended. I think it was at 24. Following the 2-run homer by Adley Rutschman in the 6th inning here, but was going out there, was utilizing all 3 of his pitches, sprinkling in the changeup a little bit more today than we have seen in recent outings, which when you're going up against an elite level offense, that is something that you're going to have to do. Kind of just throw a new little wrinkle in there from a scouting standpoint here. One thing that I thought was kind of interesting, and I commented on this relatively early on in the outing, some of the secondary stuff was down couple of ticks from a velocity standpoint. Cutter has been consistently about 90 to 92 for a good portion of this season here. Today was sitting about 88 to 90 in that velocity band there. And so for me, it was kind of interesting to see him go out there without the same velocity that we've seen. I know the 4-seam fastball will still get 97, 98, but if you see that secondary stuff couple ticks below, how's he going to be able to adapt? How's he going to be able to utilize that and continue to go at guys when he doesn't necessarily have that top shelf stuff? And he went out there today and tied a career high, had the 11 strikeouts there. So he's continued to evolve in his role as a starting pitcher and showing that he's a guy that when he has to, he can adapt to not necessarily having his best stuff and doing so against a very solid lineup like the Baltimore Orioles. That is something that is a very positive thing to see, in my opinion.
Yeah, I enjoyed his start today. Final line on Crochet, 6 innings pitched, 3 hits, 2 runs, both earned. Did walk 1, which I'm okay for starting pitchers throwing 6 innings, walking 1. And then, as you mentioned, the 11 strikeouts, his ERA sits at a 3.68 after the start. He's been arguably the best pitcher outside of one little stretch. I think it made both of us nervous. What do we actually have here? I'm glad that he turned the page on that and has continued to just pitch lights out through this second stretch of greatness that we've seen from Garrett Crochet. Steve, the velocity stuff that you're talking about right here, does this cause for concern, or do you think this is just normal wear and tear for Garrett Crochet throwing as many innings as he has for the first time in quite a while?
I think it's probably just going to be normal wear and tear, and it could just be a random fluctuation, honestly. Like I said, I mean, there wasn't really much of a deviation with the four-seam fastball. It was really just the secondary stuff today. So, I'd also be interested to know maybe if that was a concerted effort on his part to maybe take a little bit off of the cutter again, just to throw a different wrinkle at this Baltimore Orioles lineup here and say, hey, I'm going to subtract a little bit off of these secondary offerings to maybe kind of widen that velocity band with the four-seam fastball there. It worked out very well. So if that was something that was done intentionally, and again, I would love for somebody that has access to this team to directly ask Garrett Crochet that question, because again, that just speaks to the evolution of him as a starting pitcher, understanding, hey, depending on who I'm facing here, this is a good time for me to add and subtract off of some of these secondary outings here, just making him more dangerous out there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting question that you bring up. That's the type of thing that won't exactly show up in a scouting report that, might be something that Ethan Katz and Brian Bannister have sort of put into the development plan. It's could be something that was as a result of maybe a little bit of fatigue. We don't know that answer. It's something that I think would be really interesting to get to the bottom of. So I love that you brought that point up. Steven, today's ball game, I know we're working in a little bit of reverse here. Mike Soroka came in and tossed 3 innings, did strike out 5 there. I thought this was one of the better appearances of Soroka. I know he does give up the 2 runs, only one of them earned, but from what we've seen from him so far this season, I thought he was serviceable today. It wasn't atrocious.
I think he might be settling in a little bit into this new relief role here. I know there's been some conjecture back and forth about whether or not he is going to get bounced back into the starting rotation at some point here. From my perspective, and I know we talked about this maybe 7 to 10 days ago or so when the transition was made here, I just don't think there's enough there for a starting pitcher at this point. The stuff is relatively flat if he's trying to go out there and cover 5 or 6 innings. Maybe he's a guy that if you go and put him into short bursts where he is only expected to cover 3 to 6 outs. Obviously today, went out there and covered 3 innings. So if he's a little bit of a longer relief man, maybe this is going to be a role that will allow him to continue to be a part of this team. And who knows, maybe that could even transition into more higher leverage relief outings and appearances for him down the road. We've seen a couple of times the velocity tick up, even 96, 97 in some of those shorter bursts. So they could still be kind of tinkering around with Mike Soroka here to try to figure out what the ultimate bullpen role could be for him. But I think at this point right now, thrusting him into the bullpen, and I think that's just the best way to go for him right now. I don't think the idea of putting him back into the starting rotation really has much viability at this point. So maybe you have to tweak some roles a little bit. But I think this is the path right now for Mike Soroka to continue to be on this team.
Yeah, and as long as he's serviceable, he'll find himself a spot here in Chicago at this juncture. I thought that this was going to go much worse for him here in this situation. I'm glad that he got through 3 without too much damage. I thought it was going to get out of hand, at least when I saw him trot out from the bullpen. But hey, I'm glad that you brought this up in terms of him reclaiming a starting rotation spot. Obviously, we saw Nick Nastrini come up and make a start here. There's question marks all around that one as well. But Brad Keller is no longer here. If it's not Nick Nastrini, I could see where people would come up with Soroka being a name. He has made some starts for this team so far this season. I don't think that either panelist right here on the show believes that he has the stuff to get that done for as many outs as especially my co-host likes to see their starting pitcher get. But that said, Steven, when we come back through this rotation again, do you expect to see Nick Nastrini, or is there going to be another name? Maybe not this week, but the next turn through.
I don't really see the point in that. I mean, the only thing, if Nastrini has another bad outing tomorrow, and if you send him back down to Charlotte, I mean, what are you going to do? You can bring Jonathan Cannon up. Maybe you go Mason Adams, jump him up from Double-A, but I'm not particularly keen on doing that yet. I think just give Nastrini a little bit of run, see what kind of adjustments can be made. It will be interesting to watch tomorrow him facing a lineup for the second time in the span of less than a week, especially one that stuck it to him pretty good on Wednesday. So we'll see how he goes back to the drawing board. We'll see what Ethan Katz and what Brian Bannister come to the table with from a game plan perspective. And hopefully we can get some better results out of him tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm hoping for a major turnaround, and we'll get into the preview in just a little bit here, but hoping for a turnaround for Mr. Nick Nastrini. That was kind of abysmal, to say the least, and I know we talked about that on our last show. Steven, there was a situation that took place in Thursday night's ball game in the ninth inning at the end of the game. I think everybody's talked about this one. Little backstory on it. Sox are in the midst of a pretty impressive inning. There's a crooked number up there on the board in this box score. Sox put 4 runs on the board to come back from an 8-2 deficit. Things are looking good. You got runners on first and second, 1 out. Vaughn's at second base. Infield fly, and Baltimore shortstop sort of scurries around. I don't know if there's too much contact here. I think there is a little bit, but it didn't really interfere with the play being made. He was able to camp underneath this ball for at least a good solid 1-2 Mississippi, I would say. I don't know, maybe 3 Mississippi there. As that ball lands, Andrew Vaughn is called out for interference. Ball game over. Now, granted, first and second, 2 outs. See what happens here. I'm not saying the Sox would come back and win this one, but the play just didn't really feel like the way a baseball game should end, at least to me. There wasn't an egregious amount of interference. The league did call. The Chicago White Sox reportedly spoke with Chris Getz, talked about how there should have been some discretion. The umpires really dug in on the fact that there's no discretion here. You see interference, you call interference, and that's it. I kind of think that's sort of a hard ass stand from the MLB umpires. I don't know what boot camp they went through to make it up here to the major leagues, but this just felt like that meme that says you get in there and you make it all about you. Looking in the mirror right there that people like to send out when officials do things like this. Steven, I need your thoughts on this one. We haven't had a chance to even talk about it, so I need to hear your thoughts.
What is Andrew Vaughn supposed to do? I mean, he's got his back to the defender the entire time. He's going back to the bag. He doesn't know where Gunnar Henderson is. His back is to him the entire time. Never mind the fact that Gunnar Henderson took a goofy-ass route to get underneath that ball. Did I mention Andrew Vaughn had his back turned to the defender the entire time? I don't know if I touched on that yet.
I think it's confirmed now. It wasn't before, but it's confirmed now.
I mean, you can sit there and you can talk about discretion all you want. How about have some common fucking sense to realize that the runner wasn't looking at the defender? So how you're going to sit there and how you're going to levy a call like that against Andrew Vaughn when he's not looking at the defender, he's literally got his back turned and he's backpedaling to go back to second base. And he's supposed to just magically know that Gunnar Henderson is behind him? The fuck are we doing here? Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. I want to bring up some comments from Pedro Grifol in just a second, but I also want to talk a little bit about Vaughn's post-game presser during this. And I was sort of, I mean, one can make the argument that this season is already sort of lost and that this doesn't really matter. I don't know about you. If I'm taking pride in what I'm doing and that call happens and I'm on second base, I'm getting ejected from the game that's already over. That's just me, because I would be very fucking riled up about the injustice that just took place. You saw Grifol come out and yell, but then the comments afterwards didn't match what you saw on TV. It was very awkward. And I guess, Vaughn's sort of soft spoken, but the post game interview, man, he's just like, Yeah, I don't really know. Like, it didn't really feel like there was a human element there of anywhere near being ticked off about it. It just felt like, oh, that happened. Like, we're going through motions here. And I didn't like seeing that. Do you think Paul Konerko or Frank Thomas or any of the other legendary White Sox first basemen would sit there and just, oh yeah, it's just the play? No, there'd be some passion, some TWTW. I didn't get a lot of TWTW out of Andrew Vaughn in that post-game press conference. There was a lot of restraint, or maybe not even enough anger in there to have restraint. So I don't know. That one just made me a little upset watching it afterwards because I felt more fired up than the guy that it happened to.
You literally have the tying run on first base. So again, we can talk all we want about this team's offensive ineptitude and about probability of being able to, get those two runs across. It doesn't fucking matter. You have the tying run on base. The winning run is at the plate.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just going to sit there and just be like, yeah, oh, well, whatever, another loss. Fuck that. That's a loser's attitude. I've said it on this show a couple, 2-3 times, and I'm going to say it again right now. The legendary baseball coach at South Suburban College, Stephen J. Ruzich, NJCAA Hall of Famer, Stephen J. Ruzich, once famously said, when you accept losing, you are a loser. And that performance right there on Thursday night showed why they are fucking losers, because they just accept it.
I would have become more of an Andrew Vaughn fan if he went out into the post-game interview and just started tossing explicitives around. Like, I thought it was fucking horseshit. What do you think Bryce Harper would do if that play happened to him?
Bryce Harper, the guy that leads all of active players with 19 ejections during the course of his career, that guy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not even just bringing this up because, like, the Sox could have signed him, Steve. I'm just bringing it up because, like, that's a winner, right? Like, that's a guy that wants to win. And then you get this happening. You have John Schriffen, who's incensed in the broadcast booth. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the way that he cut out in that call. And just toss it to the post-game show because, he's like, I'm just trying to keep my job. It was very Hawk Harrelson-esque. I loved it. But then you go to Andrew Vaughn and it's just like there's some sort of missing compete gene here. Like, where's the anger? Where did it go? You just sort of walked off the field. Maybe not everybody on this team is like that. And in fact, if Tommy Pham was on second base when this happened, we probably get the right comments. But I don't even think they went and talked to him after the game about how he felt about that one. So, like, this is the type of thing, and this sort of is the predecessor, I think, to what we're going to talk about that happened post-game today. But this to me was like, wow, we have already rolled over, killed ourselves, died, and like we're not trying to compete for the rest of this season. Let it all go. I could not understand why there was zero emotion.
We can talk all we want about Andrew Vaughn's lack of emotion, and that's certainly a valid talking point right there. But I mean, Pedro Grifol, how the fuck do you not show some emotion there and not have some fire?
He came out and argued the call. But then the first comment that you get from him is, I'm fine with the way they called it. I'm not fine with the rule. Well, so what were you out there arguing with the umpire, like trying to petition a rule change on the spot? That didn't make sense.
Do you think Ozzie Guillen would have just been okay with that ending the way like that?
No.
How about another guy that we took to task a fair number of nights during the 2019 and 2020? You think Ricky Renteria would have just rolled over and fucking died on that?
No.
This
team has a failure to thrive. They do not understand, because the next day you should come out with so much fire, ready to, literally, as Pedro says, ready to kick ass. and you got swept in a 4-game set. Now, this is a bad baseball team, and we all know it. But where's the reaction to that brings you together as a ball club and says all right, they took it out of our hands last night. We're going to put this in our own hands, and we're going to go out here and win this ball game. No, same result. Same thing Saturday. Same thing Sunday. They have taken themselves out of ball games with this mentality, and it really sucks to watch. Then you get today. After the game, apparently there was a closed-door meeting. I started to pick up on this in the post-game show as they're talking to Garrett Crochet. He talked a little bit about, Pedro talking to them. Tweet from Scott Merkin. Grifol talked to the team after the loss. Yeah, Crochet said, yeah, that's just kind of for the guys. But then there were some quotes from Corey Lee. But before we get there, I want to read Pedro Grifol's comment in the postgame, and I'll give you Scott Merkin's account of this. When I asked Grifol to expound on the flat idea, he followed with flat period, major league game, gotta respect it, pretty simple. That was the first tweet I saw. So scroll back down the timeline. Here's the full exchange that took place before this. I don't have much. Crochet pitched his ass off. We got no hit through 8, which was actually 7. And I believe Scott Merkin had to correct the manager here. We had a pinch hitter break it up. I don't think the pinch hitter broke it up. We know Besnick, Sox Insane at Sox Insane.
Well, no.
And you called him in from the bullpen, so I'll give you credit for that. I'm going to give you credit for that. He didn't even think of it on his own. I'm surprised. The rest of the guys, not the rest of the guys, most of the guys were fucking flat today. Unacceptable. That's all I got. This is the first time we've heard some explicitives come out of Pedro Grifol's mouth. Maybe there's a little fire. I don't know. But then you get the Corey Lee comments. Here's Corey Lee reacting to that. I'll let him comment on his statement. He's going to feel that way, and obviously we have a different feeling. He's entitled to his own opinion. I think that's a valid reason. It's nothing to hide about that. What do you make of this? Because to me, this sounds like we've got people on totally different pages and all over the place in the same disorganized mess that we've seen for the last 4 years.
What I make of it is this. It's becoming very apparent that they don't respect Mr. Clean. Justifiably, he has not earned anyone's respect. He does not deserve anyone's respect in any way, shape, or form. And I see some people on Twitter.com saying that he's lost the clubhouse, that this is the beginning of the end for Pedro Grifol, that
Did he have the clubhouse at one point?
Doubtful.
I think that's
doubtful. But I see people saying that he's dead man walking and that he knows it. I have a hard time thinking that some comments from Corey Lee, as much as I have been advocating for Corey Lee in recent weeks, I just have a hard time believing that any comments that come from him are going to be the thing that causes Jerry Reinsdorf to wake up from his slumber off of his mattress of $1,000 bills and say, you know what, I'm going to fire a manager in season for the first time in close to 30 years. I just personally don't see it. At the end of the day, there's nobody really in this clubhouse that has the gravitas to be able to say anything publicly that is going to.
They got rid of all those guys, didn't they? They got rid of all those guys.
They did. One guy that you could make a case for is Thomas Pham, but he's only been here for like a month.
Yeah, he's been here for a month, and he might not be here for 2 more.
And I had somebody privately make a pretty funny comment to me that they can't wait for the Tommy Pham tell-all interview after he gets traded about what is going on in that fucking clubhouse. Because we've talked about this. Tommy Pham ain't here for anybody's bullshit, and that's gonna be something to see when all this comes out. Because you remember a year ago when all the stuff with Lance Lynn was coming out and everything. Mm-hmm. I think Tommy Pham is a guy that is pretty universally respected across the game by everyone except for maybe Jock Peterson. You can Google that if you need any more backstory on it. But this is a guy that brings the intensity and is almost universally described as a consummate professional. And so he has to just be sitting back, looking at all this, be like, what the fuck is this place? And so when he airs it out in a couple of weeks, when that time comes, it's going to be something.
Do you have your popcorn ready for that one?
Oh, I do. I don't have any popcorn on site here, but I'm definitely going to go out and I'm going to make sure that actually, you know what? I should have some getting delivered here in short order because, me being a 16-time uncle of the year, I procured some for one of my younger nephews to help support his baseball fundraising effort. So I should have popcorn here in short order, actually. So
there you go. You told me about this this popcorn fundraiser a couple weeks ago. I wasn't sure what if you had those delivered yet, but
they have not come yet, but they'll be here in short order.
I'm hoping that they're here before Tommy Pham does his tell-all. This was long overdue. I think some sort of like spills over into the media type moment with this clubhouse because this season's been so bad. I'm surprised there hasn't been more of this. Are you?
Yes and no. I mean, I think when you have a team that is as bad and has as much of a talent deficit as this one, it's kind of hard to just constantly be putting stuff in through the media because at the end of the day, they're just not good enough. So, a lot of it is going to fall on deaf ears. But, at the same time, I mean, you see just some of the ridiculous quotes coming from Mr. Clean. Eventually it's going to start to wear on these guys, and we're not even a year and a half into his tenure. And it's very obvious that nobody in that clubhouse, even guys that don't have a tremendous amount of service time, they just have no more use for this bullshit.
Has his obsession finally gotten to them?
That's a tremendous question. I think as obsessed as he might be, I think it probably is starting to rub some people the wrong way.
Yeah, that's a very fair statement. We talked about some of this schedule that we're currently part of, I believe a week ago on a Sunday Funday episode. And we previewed this series, Jonathan and I. We both said this is a probable sweep. We're able to sit here and sort of identify these things. It doesn't feel like Pedro Grifol has realized that his roster is not up to the standards that maybe 28 other ball clubs are at this point. Is that like off base? Because I what is he expecting from this? I don't, and this is the problem, man. There's no fucking direction. There's no messaging to the fans. The manager obviously doesn't know like what to expect here. Thinks we're going to compete.
No, I
don't get it. I don't get it.
It's very rare for a manager, even one as mentally inept as Pedro Grifol, to just come out and say, yeah, we know we're not going to compete this year. You got to kind of go out there and do the whole us against the world and everybody's counting us out routine. But like I said, he can't be this dumb. He's dumb. No question about it. He's easily the worst manager I have any recollection of in my lifetime. I had to stop over at my parents' house earlier today, and I was having a conversation with my dad, and I was like, Terry Bevington wasn't this dumb, was he? And he's kind of the belief that they're like neck and neck with each other. During that time frame in 95, 96, I wasn't as dialed in on a day-to-day basis with things. So the Terry Bevington era is something that is in a lot of ways kind of a blur for me. But, he's really of the belief that this Pedro Grifol experience is right on par with that. But he has to know he can't possibly think that there is talent here to be able to compete. I don't care what you say publicly. You have to know that you just don't have enough bullets in the chamber.
Here's my sort of, it's not even a rebuttal to it, just sort of where my head's at with this. Look across town. We're both Blackhawks fans. Do this Four Feather show with Johnny. Talk about the expectations going into a season. Kyle Davidson, GM, was very clear. This is a rebuild. We're not going to compete. Luke Richardson, head coach of the Chicago Blackhawks, comes out in one of his first press conferences and says, I'm going to try my best to make sure that rebuilding is hard and my team is going to play in every single game, and I'm here to win. That's fine. There is a clear direction that's been stated by the GM, and there's a clear direction that's been stated by the head coach. Maybe those things don't tie in hand to hand, but the talent's going to even itself out. With the White Sox, the GM and the ownership group and people in the front office have told fans, we're going to try and compete, and we're going to turn this thing around. And this has been the same message for the last 2 years. It's dishonest. And then you've got a manager who's sitting there sort of like, obviously he wants to win. It's the major leagues. One of his comments apparently today was about, you have to respect putting on a major league uniform. And that's fine to tell these guys. I'm not arguing with that was a bad message. But it would be one thing if everyone clearly knew, and it was made public by the front office, we're not going to compete this year. We're not going to compete next year. This is going to take 3 to 5 years. Here's what we're doing to fix. And they've done some of those things. Look at what's happening in the minor leagues right now. It doesn't take a dumb baseball fan to figure out what is actually taking place here. The comments are not there publicly to back up what the plan is. And I almost feel like that's sort of the out, right? Like if this fails again, they can come back to us and say in 3 years, well, we never told you this was a rebuild. We never told you that we were going to make the playoffs. Because what was the one thing that everybody got mad at last time? Well, this is going to take 5 years. And at year 5, Steve Stone told us that that's when the house is going to be finished. Let's set up a plan with no goalposts so that we can't move them at all. That's what I feel like we're living in.
I don't know that you're off base with that assessment there. The inconsistencies in the messaging, well, maybe not inconsistencies, just dishonesty with the messaging, whether it's from Chris Getz or from Pedro Grifol at this juncture. They're not being honest with us, obviously, and any fan that has a fully functioning brain can understand and can realize that what they are telling us is nothing but a giant line of shit. And that's why at this point, honestly, I try my best to avoid even listening to or reading Pedro Grifol's quotes, because there's just no substance to this man at all. And, the overwhelming likelihood is tomorrow afternoon, pregame, he'll probably backtrack on his comments, because that's what he does. Whether it's, I like this roster that we have, we've got enough here to compete. And then all of a sudden a bunch of guys get dealt and non-tendered or, not have their contracts renewed in the offseason. I didn't really like that group we had anyway. I was fine with the way that play was called. After thinking about it here, I don't really like how that play was called. All he does is
I'm not going to watch the Eclipse. Yeah, I watched the Eclipse.
I at least didn't watch the Eclipse and told people I wasn't going to watch the Eclipse. I'm at least a man of my word.
Well, Pedro was too obsessed to watch the Eclipse and then watch the Eclipse. I think that might go down as one of the funnier White Sox managerial backtracks of all time. There's going to be a book about the Pedro Grifol experience. I think Nick Morawski is going to have to write it because he's.
I think it's just going to be I think all it is just a pamphlet. I don't know if he's going to get a full book out of this.
Maybe 100 pages. Coffee table reader. Just quotes and
I
then
could,
the retractions.
I could go for a coffee table book about coffee tables. You don't get the reference.
It's a
God damn.
Seinfeld thing.
All right, I appreciate that, Anthony. Thank you.
No, I'm well aware. I've read enough of Seinfeld on your timeline to know what's a Seinfeld reference.
Good. I appreciate that. That makes me feel better.
You're welcome. I'm glad that that helps you. We've got some comments in here. Grifol, all talk, no action. Can't believe Getz keeps Grifol since he's Hans guy. Getz guy Santos is waiting in Birmingham. That's a name. What are your thoughts there?
A couple things here. First, as it relates to not believing that Chris Getz is going to keep Pedro Grifol, somebody actually brought this up I saw this on the timeline before we hopped on here, is the idea of him firing Pedro during the course of the season doesn't make a ton of sense from another angle, because Getz isn't tied to Pedro. So if he gets rid of him, the idea of him just being like, okay, well, I'm going to get rid of him and then I'm going to install Charlie Montoyo for the remainder of the season. Whereas if he waits until the end of the season, and if he gets the blessing from Jerry to say, yes, okay, I know the last year this deal is a sunk cost, go ahead and get rid of him. Then at this point, Chris Getz can go and actually install his guy, whomever that might be. So maybe that's part of this equation right here. As it relates to Sergio Santos, we're hearing a lot of nice things about him down in Birmingham. There aren't a ton of former major league pitchers that have been successful in the managerial space. Bud Black has had varying degrees of success during his time, whether it's with the San Diego Padres or now the Colorado Rockies. Mickey Callaway didn't fare particularly well when he was with the New York Mets. So we don't see it a ton, but in some senses, it kind of seems like they might be grooming him for a role like that. There's
been a couple of guys that we thought were being groomed for roles like that, and
they
wind up in other organizations. Look at Willie Harris.
Yeah, I still would have no problem with them bringing in Willie Harris, the guy that scored the most important run in the history of the franchise.
Yes.
Come in here and have a conversation. That's somebody that I would definitely be on the phone with personally. He doesn't have any major league managerial experience. So it's not going to be cost prohibitive. We all know that's a key criteria here.
And look, he fits that former Sox mold winner.
And he fits a former Sox mold in an important sense because, again, I will repeat, he scored the most important run in the history of the franchise.
Yes. You can't argue that. You really can't. That's why I think he'd be the perfect White Sox manager. I know that you and I both agree on this one. Here nor there, we're not picking manager replacements today. This is all just Pedro Grifol talk, which eventually leads to who the next manager of this team should be, because anytime you have this conversation, that's where it goes. That's where it goes, is he needs to be gone, and we need to, turn the page here. Steven, anything else from this series that you wanted to bring up here before we close the book on it and flush it?
We saw a couple of disappointing outings from Michael Kopech over the course of this series in the games on Friday and Saturday. I mean, Saturday they had a winnable baseball game that they let get away from them. Friday night they came back in that game to give themselves an opportunity to win, and the bullpen gave it up right there. Michael Kopech does have a home run problem, and this is something that I've talked about.
I was searching for this because you and I had this conversation. I couldn't remember if it was over text message, over the phone, in a Twitter. As this outing was happening, I was trying to go back so I can find it and screenshot it, because
it was live on these airways last week.
Remember you talking about Michael Kopech having a home run problem, and I couldn't figure out where that was, but that was the first thing that popped into my head. Is Steve has said this.
If you want to find
full display,
if you want to find it, all you have to do is clip last Sunday's episode, because Cubs on Tap member Joey Ricotta posed a question about Michael Kopech maybe being traded across town. That's what spurred that discussion.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, well, that's answered. Guys, if you want some Michael Kopech and some home run problems, we'll let Getz do the dealing there, and it'll probably not cost too much, as we discussed last weekend. Steven, outside of Michael Kopech's home run problem, um, is this is he really going to continue to have this problem in your mind, or is there like a way that he can work around this that you've seen?
I think for me, the biggest issue and something I'm going to dig a little bit deeper in is I think there's just too much of an over reliance on the fastball. Guys can
Mm-hmm.
sit just dead red on him. He's not utilizing that slider enough, and that slider has been a plus pitch for him this year. We're seeing some really interesting things with his pitch distribution over the course of the last 3 weeks, him utilizing a cutter more frequently
Mm-hmm.
here versus even the slider. And I'm not really sure I'm understanding why with that. I don't feel like there is enough of a variance there with those two pitches. So just being so fastball dependent to me is one of the biggest issues with Michael Kopech. And look,
Guys sitting dead red.
right, guys are sitting dead red. And the fact of the matter is he's averaging like 5.25 walks per nine. So he's getting himself into trouble, getting behind in counts, issuing free passes, and then giving up untimely home runs. I mean, he's his home run fly ball rate, I want to say it's like 20.5%. It's the highest rate of his career at this point.
Not good in high leverage.
No.
Not good to have that. I shouldn't say Michael Kopech is not good in high leverage. That is a not good thing to have in high leverage. We've seen him shine in spots when he doesn't get beat, but don't like seeing him get beat. As I was going to ask, outside of Michael Kopech's home run problem, though, anything else that you noticed?
Just continued offensive inconsistency here from the group. And this is just, par for the course. I mean, they are the worst offense in the league by just about every metric at this point. I saw a very disheartening stat on the timeline this morning when I was having my coffee. Jose Ramirez of the Cleveland Guardians, who everyone knows I hate with every fiber of my being,
Yes,
leads the American League with 51 RBI. The top three hitters on the White Sox have 52 RBI. That's not great.
I was going to ask, is that good? Because no. All right, let's flush that series, Steven. Let's flush that series. We're moving on. Monday, Toronto comes to town. We sort of previewed this a little bit ago. It's Nick Nastrini back on the mound. He faced Toronto in his last start and got shelled pretty good. So he'll take them on at home this time. It's a 1:10 start tomorrow, Memorial Day. Then it's a 6:40 matchup on Tuesday. It'll be Mike Clevenger against Kevin Gausman. That one will be interesting. And then Manoah and Flexen for the series finale Wednesday at 6:40. That will be a night game as the Sox are off on Thursday before they head up to Milwaukee. Steven, thoughts on this series? Give me a prediction. Yeah, let's hear it.
Thoughts are hopefully they can kind of turn the tables a little bit and just flush what we saw in this Baltimore series. This team has now lost 9 of their last 10 games after they had played some pretty good baseball for a few weeks. They have now reverted back to some of the doldrums that we've seen for a good portion of the season here. So hopefully they can go out there and get one out of these 3 games here at home against the Toronto Blue Jays. The pitching matchups aren't particularly favorable, knowing that you don't have Eric Fetty or Garrett Crochet on the mound. Maybe they will get lucky in the sense that Alek Manoah is throwing game 3, and he has just really continued to struggle here. Although, if there's one offense that can get a struggling pitcher right, it seems to be this Chicago White Sox one. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to say they steal 1 in these 3 games.
Stealing 1. I like it. I like the positivity coming from NWI Steve tonight. Yeah, I mean, one sounds good. we'll have to see where this one comes. I can't really pick it out with these pitching matchups. You brought up a good point about this White Sox team getting other teams right in different ways, whether it's their lineup, their starting pitching. We just seem to be the gift that keeps on giving for the rest of Major League Baseball. Might come in this Clevenger start is potentially where I'm at. Gaussman 3-3, 4.47 ERA. Obviously, he's a little more high pedigree than Mike Clevenger, but Clevenger has had a lot of difficulty getting himself right so far. So a bounce back game from him would be nice. We kind of need that for the trade value, if there is any there, to start to see him put something together. I would say that it's kind of time right now for Mike Clevenger to get that going, because things really have not been good. And so something needs to turn around. So I'm looking for a really solid start. Give me 6 innings, 5-6 Ks, under 3 runs, and limit the walks for Mike Clevenger to start heading this in the right direction, to be serviceable, because right now he's a guy that this rotation needs to get going behind Eric Fetty and Garrett Crochet to make things work here. So I really want to see that good Mike Clevenger game. I don't know about you.
I just want to see a good game from any of them in the series. Well, I don't care who it comes from at this point. Losing 9 out of 10 just makes me want to fucking vomit. And being on a 45 win pace makes me absolutely sick to my stomach. So I don't care who it comes from. Just somebody put an end to this madness here and fucking get this thing back on track, please, for the love of all that is holy.
Well said. Well, that about does it for us here at Sox on Tap on this Sunday Funday episode. Steven, we're going to have to flush this one. We're just going to have to flush it and move on and not be so flat next time. That's all I've got. Steve, closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts are this. I don't know if anybody saw any of my, interactions while I was at the ballpark today. There might be a certain Twitter loudmouth that may have been spotted with a John Cena-esque type bald spot in the crowd today. So it would be a real shame. By all means, nobody make fun of a certain person named Kenneth on the interwebs for that. Don't do it. I would hate to see that happen. Don't do it. Nope. Other than that, White Sox, please find a way. Win a fucking ball game. Otherwise, I'm going to lose my mind.
Let's hope Steve doesn't lose his mind and we get at least one from this series. That does it for us here at Sox on Tap. You can follow the show at Sox on Tap on X and on Tap Sportsnet for all of our podcasts, all of our writing, everything coming from there. And ontapsportsnet.com is where you can find all of our written work. You can head on over to the White Sox section there, stay up to date with the team. That's it for today. Steven, White Sox forever.
White Sox for life.